You are listening to the Strong is a Mindset podcast, episode number 162. If you ever find yourself walking through the door after work and feeling like everything falls apart from there, this one is for you. This is the Strong is a Mindset podcast, where you'll learn how to build both a strong body and a strong mind by eating, moving, and thinking. I'm your host, physician, personal trainer, certified health coach, and certified life coach, Carrie Holland. Hey, how are you? What's new? What's good? So, what's good here? Today, we are talking about the most emotionally charged, chaotic, and exhausting time of day for so many of my clients. And that time is the window between when you get home from work and when you go to bed. I think of that time as the second shift, because in all honesty, that's exactly what it feels like. It's that moment when you walk in the door, bag still on your shoulder, work shoes still on, and someone's asking, what's for dinner? But someone else needs a ride and is running late because their carpool fell through. And maybe your dog is staring at you, just waiting for you to say the word walk. And all the while, your stomach is growling and you haven't had a minute to sit, let alone think about dinner. And so begins that nighttime race that happens once your day job ends. So essentially, you clock out of one job and immediately clock into another as a mother, wife, pet parent, chauffeur, chef, tutor, and manager of all the things. It's your second full-time job as the caregiver. And what I've seen over and over again, and why I want to put a spotlight on this time of day, is because it's most often during the second shift that things go sideways. This is the time of day when my clients tell me they do the most mindless snacking, skip their workouts, eat dinner way too late, or say forget it altogether. And what's worse is that as a result, they end the day feeling wiped out, disappointed, and even guilty for how they handled those last few hours of the day. So today, I want to normalize this. I want to help you see that you are not broken and you are not lazy if the second shift is hard for you. And I also want to offer you some tools to make this time of day a little less chaotic and a little more grounded. I want to help you feel less depleted and more in control, because this time of day does not have to wreck your habits or wreck your sanity. All right, so let's go. So first, let's talk about why this time is so hard to begin with. And like most things, it's multifactorial, meaning there are a number of reasons why this time of day can be so challenging. So think about what's happening in your brain and your body at this time of day. So for starters, your body is likely already tired from the full day that you put in before you walked through the door. You may have gotten up before the sun in order to get your workout in, or you may have gotten up at the crack of dawn because you have a job that starts super early. Or you may have gotten up with a kid who decided he or she was done sleeping at 5 a.m. Most of the women I work with are tired and do not get enough sleep. And that's usually for a number of reasons, including staying up late, working extra once they come home, connecting with their partner or kids, or even numbing out with wine and doom scrolling on social media. And so there are lots of reasons, but they all add up to the same result: fatigue. And then on top of being tired at this time, you might also be legitimately hungry. In fact, I see this often. Lunch may have been hours ago, and maybe you had a mid-afternoon snack and it just wasn't satiating enough, and that it didn't have enough protein, healthy fat, or fiber, and it just made you more hungry. Maybe you didn't have a snack at all, and that leads to nonstop grazing the minute you get into the kitchen. Maybe it's because you don't eat enough at breakfast or lunch, and then by the time you get home, you are straight up hangry. So these are some of the more common scenarios I run into. And what I see repeatedly is that when you walk into your house at the end of a long day hungry, it often leads to overeating way more than you intended. And another reason the second shift can be so hard is the mental whiplash that you experience when you switch roles. So think about it. You're transitioning from a mostly structured, task-oriented mindset of your job straight into the emotional labor of caregiving and managing your home, and often that is without skipping a beat. And that abrupt transition can be super jarring. Your brain doesn't get a chance to downshift or adjust. And the more extreme the contrast, so think your quiet office to the loud kitchen, or the mostly peaceful commute to the chaos at home, the more disorienting that can feel. The role switching takes a lot of energy, and if you don't acknowledge it or if you don't plan for it, it can leave you feeling rattled. And part of the reason this can be so challenging is that you've got no buffer or margin. So home is often the opposite of relaxing in the first 30 to 60 minutes that you get there after work. You walk in the door, and often you get immediately pulled in to dinner, homework, pets, sports, activities, laundry, all of it. The switch is immediate, and there is no decompression time. And when you don't get a chance to breathe or reset, your nervous system stays activated. And that's when reactive decisions like zoning out or overeating are more likely. And here's another thing potentially working against you, and that's decision fatigue. So think about it. By the time you get home, your brain has made thousands of decisions already, like what to say in that email, how to respond during this contentious meeting, whether or not to hit snooze, whether to pick up groceries or skip it. Decision fatigue is real. So by the time someone asks, "What's for dinner?" your brain is done. It's tapped out. So it's no wonder you default to takeout or cereal or wine and popcorn. And those are not failures of discipline. They're symptoms of a depleted brain. And to add to that, this time of day can bring up a whole load of emotions: resentment for being the default parent, guilt for not feeling more present, frustration that you still haven't had a minute to yourself, and overwhelm from trying to juggle it all. And here's the thing, most of us don't process those emotions in real time because you're just trying to get dinner on the table. So that is when you stuff down your feelings and reach for a snack instead. And it's not weakness, it's survival. I've talked about this before, but you become a machine, all action, going through the motions, getting stuff done, but you're not thinking or feeling. You're just doing. And then finally, another reason that the second shift can be so challenging is that for many people, this time of day is the least structured. So for most people, your morning has a rhythm. Wake up, maybe work out, get ready, get out the door. Then your workday has meetings and blocks of time for certain tasks. But the evening, for some homes, the evening can be a bit of a free-for-all. It may be that every day of the week is different depending on activities, commitments, and responsibilities. So there may not be built-in structure or systems to your evenings the way that there is during the day. And without routine or structure, your brain will most certainly default to the easiest, most familiar thing, which is often mindless eating or zoning out. Routine is what gives your habits a place to land, and without it, you might find yourself constantly reacting. So, to pull this all together, this may be stating the obvious, but there are many, many reasons why your second shift can be so challenging. And in reality, what most of us actually want in this window of time is pretty simple. We want to feel calm, grounded, focused, capable. We want to make choices that support our goals instead of defaulting to autopilot. And at the end of the day, we want to go to bed feeling proud of our decisions instead of disappointed and full of regret. We want to reset and regroup, and we don't want to spiral. We want to feel like what we did was enough, like we were present, intentional, and operating from our values instead of reacting to everything being thrown at us. We want to end the day with a sense of sufficiency, not depletion. And if you're nodding along, I hear you, and I want you to know that it is possible. But it doesn't happen by accident. It takes awareness, intention, and some deliberate strategy. Now, before we dive into what actually helps, let me take a minute to talk about what doesn't work, because this is where so many of us get stuck. What doesn't work is doing the same thing over and over again every night and hoping it finally gets easier. Walking in the door with no plan and no intention and expecting that this time you'll have the energy or willpower to make better choices, that is not a strategy. That is wishful thinking. And it also doesn't work to label your nights as chaos or a disaster and expect them to feel anything different. When you keep calling it chaos, you keep creating chaos. Your words become your filter, and they reinforce the patterns that you're trying to change. So what else doesn't work? Expecting a gourmet dinner when you've got 10 minutes and 3 places to be. Setting the bar so high that anything less than perfection feels like failure. Hoping that your willpower will carry you through even when you're exhausted, depleted, and being pulled in 10 different directions. These things, they don't work because they set you up to fall into the exact same traps, and they leave you feeling frustrated, guilty, and stuck in a cycle that you so desperately want to break. So, in order for your second shift to feel different, stop doing what doesn't work. Do not rely on energy that you don't have or motivation that fades by 6 p.m. So instead, let's talk about the tools that actually make a difference. Not because they're perfect, but because they are practical, doable, and built for real life. Okay, so here are a number of different strategies and ideas to help you manage your second shift. First and foremost, have a plan. I know I mentioned before that this time of day may be more unstructured and more of a free-for-all than your workday, but that does not mean that you have to be unstructured. You can still have a plan for yourself, no matter what the evening holds for you. So what exactly does that mean? It means knowing what's coming. It means looking ahead and having an idea of who needs to be where when. It means knowing what you've got in the fridge and having a plan for dinner, knowing how much time you have and how a workout fits in. And what this adds up to is looking ahead and making decisions ahead of time. So I have one client who has started doing this on her way home from work. She calls it sorting through the weeds. She thinks through what she's got at home for dinner, which is often some air fried chicken because she pre-preps it before her work week starts. But she also thinks through her family schedule and organizes in her brain where she's got to be when. But beyond that, she also checks in with herself to see how she's doing, how hungry she is, how her day has been, and what she needs. And I love that. She's got a drive home from work every day. So she uses that time to her advantage to clear her brain, think, and plan ahead so that when she walks through the door, she's ready. And I have another client who knows that she comes home from work super hungry because her lunch is typically hours earlier. And her family usually eats dinner later in the evening. So now she's determined a planned snack that she's got when she gets home is apples and peanut butter, plus or minus some cottage cheese if she's still extra hungry. But this has been super helpful for her. She's got it planned out. She always has those foods in her fridge. And most importantly, she doesn't have to think about it. If she's hungry when she gets home, that is her snack. There's no negotiating. And that is the whole point of having a plan. The goal is to not have to think so hard. I don't want you spending your precious brain energy deciding on a snack at 5:45 when you've got kids to drive, dinner to make, pets to walk, laundry to fold, or more email to address. Have the plan already in place so that it's one less thing to think about. So don't wing it. Know what's for dinner. Know if and when and where you're working out. Know what your snack will be when you walk through the door. That plan, that is your anchor. Okay? So next, while I'm talking about having a plan, I also want to suggest that you plan for a pause. So what does that even mean? It means you give yourself just a few minutes to transition. You give yourself some time to move from one role to the next. If you've got a commute, that could be 5 minutes alone in the car before you walk into your house. If you work from home, it could be a few minutes in your home office with your computer shut down, door still closed, where you give yourself some time to breathe. Whatever it is, that pause is your buffer. It helps to reduce or even eliminate the mental whiplash that can happen when you flip immediately from one role to the other with no time to transition. That tiny buffer can change everything and it can set you up for the rest of your night. All right? And then here's another very simple suggestion that I've offered to many clients. This builds directly on having a plan, and that is eat dinner earlier. Now, I just said that this is a simple solution, but I also recognize that it may not be that simple to go from eating dinner at 8:30 to eating dinner at 5:30 if you've been doing it that way for years. That is a big shift. But here's the thing. If you've already taken time to plan your meals, look ahead at your schedule, and think through your evening, this becomes a lot more doable. Planning will set the stage and pave the way for you eating earlier. And this one matters because I've seen it repeatedly. When dinner happens too late, it often leads to hours of grazing, mindless snacking, and walking into the kitchen on autopilot. You're hungry, you're tired, and you start grabbing whatever food is in sight. And often, you end up consuming the equivalent of a dinner in snacks and bites before you ever sit down to your actual dinner. But it's not registering because those bites and snacks were in passing. And then it all adds up. So I'm not saying that this shift will be seamless or that your whole family will instantly be on board, but I am saying that it might be worth exploring. Consider starting with 1 or 2 days a week where you experiment with eating earlier. Have your dinner before sports or a simple early meal that keeps everyone satisfied. It does not have to be fancy, but when you pair a little forethought with the willingness to try something new, it might drastically change how your evening feels and how your body feels at the end of the day. And remember, planning does not just help you get things done, it helps you stop reacting. It keeps you proactive. It gives you more calm and less cleanup, literally and emotionally. All right? So another thing you can do to make your second shift easier is anticipate your autopilot. And that means you know yourself and you check in with yourself to know what your patterns are. If you know that you always reach for chips while cooking dinner, you plan for it and plan for an alternative. If you know that if you've had a bad day at work, the first thing you do is reach for the wine, plan for that too and what you'll do instead. Have a snack ready when you get home, like my client with her apples and peanut butter. Have a flavored bubble water instead of the wine. Know what your defaults are, and then have your plan to change the default. And the whole point here is to be onto yourself, to know not only what your stressors are, but then take it a step further and know what your typical reactions to them are so you can catch them in real time and interrupt them. And while having replacements for your habits, like bubble water instead of wine or a healthy snack instead of chips, while those things are important, there is something else here I want you to be ready for, and that is your brain. I want you to be ready for your justifications, for your negative self-talk, for your resignation. That is what I want you to be ready for. So if your go-to justification when you've had a day is, I earned this, I want you to be ready for that. What are you going to say to yourself in response? Or if you get to the end of the day and tell yourself, I'm done, as you reach for a cookie, what are you going to say to yourself? So just as much as your actions matter, what you tell yourself matters too. So be ready for that. Have a response for yourself when you start thinking, I earned this. Something like, I don't eat snacks to cope with a hard day. Or there is no earning food. Or I don't justify mindless eating. I don't care what it is, but I would love for you to be ready with how you will respond to yourself when your justifications start to come up. Okay? And while I'm talking about talking to yourself, let me also point out that another tool that you can use to manage your second shift is your language. And to best explain this, let me give you a client example. So I was working with a client on her habits, and she described her nighttime routine at home after work as a tornado. And it was interesting because when she was describing it to me, she didn't hesitate. She was very matter of fact. Her evenings, they were a tornado, like it was a straight up truth. And so I just gently asked her how it felt when she thought of her nights as a tornado. And as you can imagine, it did not feel good to her. And as a result, her nights were rushed. She was inhaling dinner as fast as she could so she could get on to walking dogs and doing kid bath and bedtime. And in many instances, she was overeating. So do you see what's happening here? She described her nights as a tornado, and she was proving that true in her actions. She treated her nights as if it was a race to finish, and in that process, it became a tornado. And that gave us an opportunity to talk about the impact of her language and how our words are so important because those words create a reality. So again, I just gently pointed out that by naming her evenings a tornado, she was also creating a tornado. So remember, your words, they are your filter. So if you believe that your nights are chaos and you describe them as chaos, then you will use that as your filter and find all the reasons that your nights are in fact chaos. But if you want your nights to feel different and not feel like a tornado or chaos, that is also entirely possible. And it starts with how you think and talk about it. So imagine what it would be like to tell yourself and to practice believing that your nights can be calm. Imagine having calm as your filter. What would happen then? And this is exactly what I talked about with my client. And she chose to start reminding herself that her nights did not have to feel chaotic. And she started telling herself this: no matter the circumstances, I choose to be calm. She emailed that to me. And the best part about this is that her husband liked her statement so much, he started saying it too. So I will take that as a double win. Okay? And the point here is to show yourself that a different outcome is possible. And it starts with your words. So think about how you describe your second shift. What words come up for you? Tornado, chaos, frantic, crazy, a mess. Those are some of the words my clients have used. And let me clarify, the goal here is not to take that away from you. Remember, I am not here to tell you that you're wrong for feeling like your nights are like a tornado. Instead, my goal is to help you see that you've got agency and you can choose how your nights go, even if it does feel like a tornado on the outside. And my client put it so well. I want to share her words here. She said, chaos doesn't have to exist in my mind, even if it's all around me. And there it is. That's it. That's the sweet spot right there. You can't control your toddler. You can't control your teenagers. You can't control your pets or the weather or the size of your laundry load or the traffic. There are loads and loads of things in the evening that are just not under your control. And that's okay. You don't have to control everything that's going on around you in order to have control of your mind. And I would argue that having control over your own mind is way more important than controlling your kids or your dog. Okay? So the idea here is that next time you catch yourself describing your night as a disaster or chaos or crazy or a mess, pause. Notice it. Notice your words. Notice your self-talk and what you're feeling. And then ask, what would happen if I chose a different filter? What if I started believing that I can be calm, even in the middle of all the noise? Because your words, they are not just descriptions. They are instructions. And we want those instructions to move you towards your goal. And when you change your words, you start to change your experience. And here's something else you can do to help make your second shift a little easier. So this might go against every instinct you have as a high-performing overachiever, but here goes. You might need to lower the bar. And I do not mean that in a defeatist way. I mean it in the most kind, practical, and sanity-saving way possible. Because here's what I see so often. My clients set the bar impossibly high for themselves, including in their evenings. They want to prepare a homemade, balanced dinner that everyone will actually eat. They want to be patient, present, and engaged with their kids. They want to fit in a workout, get the laundry folded, and have a meaningful adult conversation with their partner, all in the span of a few short hours after a full day of work. And so that all sounds really great in theory, but I want to offer a dose of reality for you. All of those things, they just may not be possible. So you may need to lower the bar and change your definition of what a successful evening looks like for you. And here's why I'm suggesting this in the first place. When you have unrealistic expectations of what your evenings are supposed to be, what happens when they inevitably fall short? Well, if you're anything like my clients, you feel like you failed, like you didn't do enough, like you aren't enough. And that right there is the real problem. The expectations are so high that there's no room for being human, for being tired, or for just getting through the day. So when I say lower the bar, I'm talking about giving yourself permission to simplify, permission to do less and let that be enough. So if dinner is scrambled eggs and toast, that counts. If your kids eat chicken nuggets and baby carrots on paper plates, that also counts. If your workout is a 10-minute walk around the block while your kid's at practice, that also counts. If you take 5 deep breaths in your car before you walk in the door, also counts. And this is not about lowering your standards forever. It's about adjusting your expectations to match the reality of your current life season. Because when your expectations are aligned with what is actually possible, your nights become more manageable, and the voice that tells you it's not enough, it will start to quiet down. And perfectionism gets replaced with sufficiency. So perfectionism, it thrives in that space between what's real and what's ideal. And if you're constantly measuring your success by an unrealistic version of what your nights should look like, you will always fall short. So instead of measuring your evenings by what you should be doing, try measuring your evening by what matters most. Did everyone get fed? Did you show up in a way that was kind and mostly present? Did you give yourself what you needed in order to not lose your mind? Those, to me, those are all wins. So I invite you to let go of the idea that you need to earn rest or relaxation at home by doing everything perfectly. You don't. You are allowed to end your day, even if the laundry is not folded, and even if your dinner was not Instagram worthy. Your worth is not determined by your productivity. And here's what I want you to know. When you give yourself permission to lower the bar, you actually create more room. You create room for calm, room for connecting with your people, and ultimately more room for you. And finally, one last tool I want to offer you as you rethink your evenings. Decide who you want to be during this time of day. This is one of the most powerful tools you've got, as it taps directly into identity. Because when you decide ahead of time who you want to be during your second shift, you stop reacting and you start becoming. You stop letting your circumstances dictate your behavior, and you start showing up from a place of intention and empowered choice. So instead of saying, evenings are always a mess, you start saying, evenings are hard, but I show up grounded. Instead of defaulting to, I'm too tired to care, you tell yourself, I protect my peace even when I'm tired. So, in essence, you choose your identity and then you act from it. You're deciding exactly who you want to be during this time, and then you're taking steps to prove it true. And no, you will not do it perfectly. That's okay. But when you practice showing up as the calm, capable, intentional version of yourself over and over again, it starts to stick. And over time, your nights will feel less chaotic, not because your life has changed, but because you changed. And that is huge. And so now, if you're listening to all of this and thinking, this all sounds great, but by the time I get home, I'm so tired, I don't even care. I want you to know that I hear you. That feeling, it's real. And it's not because you're lazy or unmotivated. It's because you've probably reached your limit. When you find yourself saying, I just don't care anymore, it's usually not apathy. It's depletion. It's exhaustion. It's a signal that something deeper is off. Maybe you are overextended. Maybe you're carrying too much without enough support. Maybe the expectations on you are simply unsustainable. And no, I'm not trying to open up a whole can of worms here, but I do want to gently suggest that if you're ending every day on empty and feeling like you've got nothing left, including the energy to care, it might be time to ask some honest questions. Like, are you burned out? Are you holding and enforcing boundaries? Or are you trying to do it all? Are you getting any help? And you don't have to have all the answers right now. But even just noticing that you feel this way is an important first step. Because when you acknowledge that kind of exhaustion, you give yourself permission to approach things differently. You give yourself permission to rest and get support, to stop white knuckling your way through your evenings and start rebuilding in a way that's more sustainable. So this is not about finding more motivation. It's about addressing the root cause of why you're so depleted in the first place, because you deserve better and you deserve more than ending every day wiped out and frustrated. So here is your takeaway. That window of time between work and bed does not have to be the hardest part of your day. It will probably still be busy. It might still be noisy, but it does not have to be chaos. It does not have to be a tornado. You can plan. You can pause. You can use language that empowers you instead of drains you. And you can choose to be calm, really. Because even if your circumstances stay the same, your schedule, your family's needs, the noise, you still get to decide how you show up in it. And that is where all of your power is. Not in making everything perfect, but being intentional with what you can control. You cannot control every demand, but you can control how you respond. And that small shift can completely change how your evenings feel. So the goal isn't to make your second shift easy. The goal is to make it yours, to bring just a little more intention, a little more structure, and a whole lot more compassion to a part of the day that often feels chaotic and depleting. It is possible, right? And if you want help putting this into practice, let's go. This is exactly the kind of work we do in coaching. Not perfect, just more peace, more intention, and more energy for the things that matter. Check out my website, send me a message at www.carriehollandmd.com/contact, and let's talk about how coaching will help you shift the way you think, feel, and show up in the hardest parts of your day. All right? Thank you again for hanging out with me, and I'll catch you again next week. Hey, if you want to build muscle but don't know where to start, I've got you covered. Head over to carriehollandmd.com/buildstrength and download my free guide to help you maximize your strength training. Inside, you'll find the essential exercises for building muscle, plus simple 1, 2, and 3-day workout plans that you can follow with just dumbbells and a bench. You'll also find strength training tips to help you train smarter and see real results. My goal is to help you get strong, and this strength training guide will help you do it. Go to carriehollandmd.com/buildstrength and check it out. Thank you for listening to the Strong is a Mindset podcast. If you want to learn more about how to build both a strong mind and a strong body by eating, moving, and most importantly, thinking, check out carriehollandmd.com.